Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping you feel better about your finances. I'm your host, Jim Grace, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the psychology of money and explore the emotional aspects that shape our financial decisions and how we feel about them. A quick note before we start, although I do hope that you find the information on this show to be helpful, in no way are any of these discussions to be taken as specific financial advice. Please do your own research and talk to your own advisors, especially when making important financial decisions. Well, good morning, Dr. Moira Somers and Shaun Erickson. Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness. I appreciate you both being here with me this morning.
Pleasure to be here.
So this is, it might feel really self-serving, which a lot of these episodes are, because I'm really interested in understanding a little bit more about myself. When I think about getting things done or not getting things done and how that makes me feel, it's not a great feeling when we're not crossing things off the list, when we're not moving forward towards goals. And I feel that about myself often. So I'm really excited to talk to both of you to first understand a little bit more about myself and where some of those things come from. But most importantly, where do we go from here and how do we unstick ourselves, so to speak, and start moving things forward? So I appreciate you both being here. Dr. Somers, I guess it might make sense to start with you. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about your background and the work that you do? And I guess I'm most interested, why behavior change? Or is there anything in your career that led you to the point you're at now to really help people change behavior and get things done?
I have worked for many, many years as a psychologist, working with people who've had various conditions affecting their brain. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist. And some years ago, I became really interested in the world of behavioral economics and financial psychology. And so to this day, I still kind of work in both worlds, the world of healthcare and the world of money. I did my doctoral dissertation on the topic of procrastination. And what's really interesting is just how challenging it can be to initiate and maintain the kinds of behaviors that support our long-term health and well-being, whatever domain we're talking about, whether that's fitness or finance. So there are just some really intriguing overlaps, things that cut throughout multiple domains of life. And I'm just really interested in how can we support people in making the changes they want to make?
That's great. And I will raise my hand again as a victim of procrastination. I think that's something that I battle regularly. Shaun, I don't know if you agree, but that's kind of a big word, right? Procrastination. Can you help us understand when we're feeling in those moments where we're just not able to get going and moving forward and get started and putting things off? What's happening in our brains or our bodies that gets us into that position?
Procrastination is best thought of as a strategy for coping. And usually what people are trying to cope with is some kind of unpleasantness of the experience. And whatever that unpleasantness feels like internally, whether that feels like anxiety or boredom or loathing or terror, it all kind of eventuates in this feeling, I don't feel like doing this thing. And it turns out that avoidance is an absolutely brilliant strategy for dealing with that feeling. Oh man, it works. So too does a belt of alcohol. There's just some things that work in the short run that are highly, highly effective, but really ineffective in the long run. And of course, bite us in the end. So primarily, procrastination is a means of just dealing with unpleasant emotion. For people who do it chronically, for whom it isn't just sort of domain specific or occasional, for those people, it's a way of kind of condensing. What it feels like is they're condensing the unpleasantness into this really contracted period close to a deadline. But it then becomes this self-perpetuating thing. There's something called the peak end rule that social scientists talk about, which is our last, the emotion we had at at the very end of an experience, whether it's the emotions we had at the end of a holiday or what we're feeling at the end of a workout, that has a really disproportionate effect on how we remember the whole experience and whether and how we then want to engage in the next experience of it. So if my last experience with the personal trainer was that I was sucking air and wanting to die, I might not want to re-engage very quickly with that or to do the follow-up. So most personal trainers will make sure that they take you through this very lovely kind of cool down chat, and they make sure that everything's cool before they let you go, because they sort of understand the peak end rule, even if they're not talking about it. But for procrastinators, what ends up happening is that their last experience of working on the task then ends up being hair on fire, really unpleasant stress, last minute brinksmanship, where they don't have time to check things over. Take tax submission, for example. The people who submit tax forms on the very last day tend to be people who forget to sign the tax form and who have all these little mistakes that they very likely would have caught if they'd done it with a little bit of time to spare. So in the end, they end up feeling like, oh, I hate this. I suck at this. I'm not good at this. It was really stressful. And then the next time, lo and behold, tax season runs around again. They repeat it. And so it develops a habit strength and can be a little challenging to break out of.
So I'm hearing a lot in what you just described, but it sounds like a lot of procrastination starts with emotions and feelings, right? And our need to try to deal with those emotions and feelings. And then that sets us down this path of habits and behaviors that are potentially negative, but it all, seems to start with that kind of the human side, the emotional side of what we're dealing with at the time.
It does. And we often don't think of boredom or disengagement, disinterest or lack of interest as being an emotion, but it is really part of that underpinning. And so we do just tend to put off the stuff that doesn't capture our heart and mind.
So what else besides emotion when we're feeling like we're not able to get things done and we're procrastinating to deal with those emotions? Is there anything else going on that we should be aware of that keeps us from moving forward?
Sure. I'm just going to get really pragmatic, because sometimes emotion can make you feel like you have to go on this archaeological expedition to uncover all of your trauma. But a lot of it also comes down to just the fact that there's competing demands on our time and our energy and our money. And often those demands are relentless and they can be overwhelming. And so it's almost like a scheduling strategy that you just attend to stuff when it's right in your face. That's one way of dealing with the overwhelm. And then the third strategy, and I list it third, but I cannot emphasize this one enough, is the problem of forgetting and of not having ways of reminding yourself that this was your intention to do this. There's some really interesting research from the field of behavioral economics, and it estimates that 40 to 70% of our best intentions are forgotten.
40 to 70%. Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of times during the day, I need to repot that plant. Oh, I need to send that card. Oh, I should really reach out and make sure that, so-and-so got that document. If it only stays in our head, it just tends to drift off into the ether.
So I think what you just described in forgetting, I think it's really great reminder for a lot of people that we're just human beings and it's totally natural to forget. And I want to get into that, and I want to bring Shaun into the conversation because I think it'll be really interesting to talk about his work as a practitioner and what he's up to with Knudge. But before we do that, I am currently somewhat obsessed with the idea of overwhelm and what we all face on a day-to-day basis. The question I have, can you maybe describe overwhelm a little bit? And I think when I hear it, and I think others might have this impression, when somebody's overwhelmed, there might be the type of person that is kind of huddled in the corner and just paralyzed to do anything because life is too much to deal with, right? But I think, and that might be some folks that need some help to kind of deal with some of those more serious issues, emotional issues that they have to kind of get themselves unstuck. But I consider myself in this camp, and a lot of the clients that I work with are just busy people, and they have too many, as you described, too many demands coming at them at once. So can you talk a little bit more about that feeling of overwhelm and maybe just the limitations that our brains have in terms of dealing with all the different responsibilities and roles that we have throughout the day?
I'm sure everybody listening to the call has got some story about that and what it feels like internally when that's going on. There is a success element sometimes to overwhelm, that the better you are, the more stuff you're asked to do. The more curious you are, the more you sign up, the more little ones under your care or elderly folks under your care, right? There's sort of what you do to yourself, and then there's what being in community and what being in family means for your life. So what it feels like, for a time, it can feel like, yeah, this is good. I got this going. I like what I'm doing. I like that all this stuff is happening. But then at a certain point, often because we overcommit our future self, and then we arrive at that point in the future, and then we've got to pay the piper. And what it feels like to me when that happens is that I am on a black diamond ski run at the end of a day when I have no business being there. And I'm scared I'm not going to make it to the bottom intact, right? Like, I just don't know that I've got it left in the tank to get there. Other people feel like, they're spinning plates, and they're just moving from task to task to get it done. So that's the feeling state of overwhelm. And what can lead to it is a kind of unconscious acceptance of things that come your way without really being intentional about the yes. It's like the yes bypasses your cortex and just comes out your mouth without really being processed in any meaningful way. And that's when we can get into trouble.
And you hear that a lot, protecting your yes, right? Saying no to things so you can feel good and intentional about the things that you agree to. But I don't think we think about it enough, that we just have limitations in our energy and our mental capacity and our emotional capacity. And it seems to kind of bleed into all areas of my life and the clients that I work with. And I think your analogy of a black diamond ski run is a really good one, where if you don't have the energy to deal with the physical demands that you've put yourself in that athletic endeavor because of the day that you just had, it's probably not a good idea to go barreling down a ski mountain at a high rate on a challenging course, right? And I think, that's an extreme athletic example, but I feel that in my own life. If I'm not taking care of myself physically, if I'm not getting enough sleep, if I'm not eating well, then I'm less patient with my kids, less likely to be crossing things off my own to-do list and kind of moving things forward. So I think it's a great point to think about overwhelm in general, because I feel like that's the majority of us, that we're just busy and we have too much going on, and it's really difficult to try to balance all those things out.
Well, it's also a question of, so there's this limited capacity of mental energy, right? Like, you only have so much to go around. There's only so much of the pie that can be divided. And then it becomes a question of what is resourcing you. And if you are dealing, for example, with financial scarcity, boy, does that suck up a lot of mental energy. Or if you're dealing with chronic pain, or you've got a family issue, work has suddenly supersized its demands on you, that pie of mental energy has to get carved up and in different ways. And usually the first tell that you're being overtaxed is that you start feeling things more intensely. So the thing that might have been a bit of a nuisance or an annoyance just triggers like rage, or something that might have moved you a little bit suddenly feels like the most important piece of poetry that has ever been produced, and you distribute it to all your friends because you were so moved, and then you look at it in the morning and you think, oh my goodness. So that amplification of emotion, for both in the positive and the more difficult way, is usually the tell for overwhelm. And then it starts showing behaviorally and cognitively.
Yeah, my wife laughs at me. We were watching Ted Lasso recently, and he's a generally positive guy, and there's a lot of great messages in that show for people who are familiar. But I got a little choked up a couple of weeks ago watching an episode, and it's just, she started making fun of me and kind of teasing me a little bit, and I just told her, I said, I've got too much going on, I'm tired, and this is me when I'm stressed and tired. Ted Lasso chokes me up, so here we are.
Oh, milk commercials will do it to me. I don't know, what does it to you?
Well, Jim, you're also in a helping profession. And I think that, I know you say everyone's busy and everyone, but I think sometimes when you're in a helping profession like you are, and people reach out for help and you have this ability to help them, it's harder to say no. It's harder to, not keep taking it all on, especially when you're not in control of the timing of when people are reaching out for help. And oftentimes in our world, that's a condensed period of time.
Right. There are
certain times during the year where it just happens to be that, everyone's thinking about similar things, or certain times in the world where the news is indicating for people to ask questions and be curious and think about certain things.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Shaun, Moira highlighted for us a couple of different reasons why we have trouble getting things done or not accomplishing our goals. Procrastination and emotion, that's tied into that, being overwhelmed and busy, and just simply forgetting, which I think is a great opportunity to talk about with you because of the work that you do with Knudge. But before that, can you tell people a little bit about yourself and your practice? And I guess what were the types of things in your practice that you were seeing that led you to want to start a FinTech company, essentially, to try to solve the problem? What were you identifying or dealing with that got you to that point?
Sure. Yeah, I guess as background, I'm a financial planner and work at a financial planning firm, Singapore Partners. And as Jim said, also co-founder of Knudge, which is spelled with a K. And Knudge provides this shared to-do list between service professionals and their clients. And it sends timely reminders, keeping everyone on the same page, making sure nothing falls through the cracks.
And just to jump in real quick, I'm a user of Knudge, and Knudge is not a sponsor of this conversation. So I'm a fan of Shaun and his work, but there's no other reason why we're having this conversation other than I think it's a great service that you provide. So just wanted to give that quick disclaimer.
Cool. Thanks, Jim. I think, Knudge was born out of the work we do as financial planners. And I think the thing, Moira, that you said today that really sort of hit me and resonated was the word unpleasantness. And that unpleasantness is often a reason for procrastination. And as you scan through the list of services that most financial planners provide, and you scan through the areas of life that we are touching on, there can be a lot of positives, and things can, feel positive when you're able to get to that point of talking to clients about their priorities and their life and things. But in a vacuum, they can also feel pretty unpleasant. Like, we're talking to people about their spending every day. We're talking to them about their debt. Who likes debt? We're talking to them about their taxes. Nobody likes taxes, except for maybe accountants. I don't know. We're talking to them about what they want to happen when they die, or when they get disabled, or when they need care in their life. Like, what about any of this is pleasant? And then even some of the things that, for some people can be a little more fun. I think for most people, the investments, right? Things that you can make. For most people, that's stressful too, because they're watching this, thing move up and down and they don't have any control over it. So, I think unpleasantness is something that, I hadn't thought as much about, because as a planner, I love this stuff. We love getting into it, but we realize most people aren't like us. They don't like this stuff, and that's why they're coming to us for help. So yeah, the work that we do at Single Point and how it led to Knudge, we think of ourselves as it's really project management for our clients' financial lives. And we want to be partners to our clients in helping them make great decisions around their entire life. But I think what we found in doing that work was the true unlocking of the magic and the value that comes from it. I think a lot of people can do the strategy. There's a lot of people that can know and understand the technical side of things and do the analysis for someone and do the strategy. But where the magic was happening for us was in becoming an accountability partner and making sure that everything was actually getting done. And that side of the job is where we continued to hear just this positive feedback and thank you so much for staying on top of me. It also was a part of the job that was very time consuming. It didn't always feel good because you felt like you were spending your time nagging people sometimes. And really, I think one of the bigger things is that the client was not in control at all on when and how they were being communicated with. I mean, we're having this conversation. It's a Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning. This is when we're all working. Mm-hmm. Families we work with tend to be, working families with busy lives. And if I choose to send them their follow-up email with 5, 6, 7 action items on it Tuesday morning at 9:30 while they're at work, by the time they get home at night, maybe get the kids to soccer practice and back and somehow cobble dinner together and get homework done and get everyone to bed and then do a little bit of catching up on their own work. I mean, it's 9 or 10 o'clock at night. They're on the couch watching Ted Lasso, crying.
Apple TV is not a sponsor of the show either, just to throw that out.
They're not in a position to be able to take on these action items that, oftentimes are also a little unpleasant. Mm-hmm. So, that was another big driver for us in saying there's got to be a better way to do this.
Can I ask you a quick question before you describe, maybe the development of Knudge and how it works and where it kind of ties into this overall conversation? I just want to touch back on something you said about the thank yous that you were receiving from your clients. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's important that, if I understand you correctly, it wasn't thank you for this perfectly constructed asset allocation. It was thank you for helping me accomplish this particular task. And I'm curious if they ever described how they were feeling after it was done.
Absolutely never been thanked for an asset allocation or, having a conversation in detail about, well, if there was a massive accident and every single member of your family were to die, then who are we going to give this money to? Like that, we haven't been thanked for. No. It was around, and I feel like maybe I would get the thank yous because my instinct in sending the reminders was often to apologize for sending the reminder and say, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're busy. I'm sorry to bother you. You said this was important and, it's keeping me up at night. So I wouldn't tell them that, and I was expecting to get a reply of, I got it. You've sent me 4 reminder emails. I know it's on my plate. Just leave me alone. But the reply would be, no, don't apologize. This is super helpful. Please I'm sorry I haven't gotten to it yet, but the fact that you're keeping me on task with it is really valuable.
And we should, if you don't mind, real quick, just describing how Knudge works, because I think it's important. And I've had a similar experience as I've implemented it. My impression was that people are getting bombarded with so much information and content. And full disclosure, as a hypocrite, I'm going to notify people that this podcast episode exists and put it in their inbox and alert them to it. So we're going to pile on here with this information. But I think part of what I'm intrigued by is how we help our clients sift through all of it and receive the important stuff. But before we talk about that, can you just describe how Knudge works for people who might not be familiar? Because I think that'll be important.
Yeah, as a financial planner, we meet with clients, have these great conversations, and then we send them back out into the world. And our typical process was we would send them out back into their world and life with this long email with a list of 5 or 6 things on it. And inevitably what would happen is I'd get a response back the next day with, hey, I did these first 2 and I'll get to the rest. And I'll get to the rest rarely happened. And so with Knudge, what we do is we take those tasks and we break them down into, discrete tasks that get put into the system, and the system provides a shared to-do list between both parties, and it provides timely reminders to the person who is meant to take action on that, leading up to and potentially past the date it is agreed upon being due. And that due date becomes, and due date isn't always the right word for it, but that, coming up with an agreed upon time frame for when it would be reasonable for each of these items to be completed by, that has become an important part of our conversation and process with clients. So instead of just saying, hey, here's this list of 7 things, go get it, we can break them down into what are the things we can do now, what are the things we can do pretty soon, and what are the things that are out there for later. But at least when we have those things that are out there for later, there's now a home for them. There's a place for them to be stored so that they're not taking up that mental energy of the client. They know that there's a process in place that's going to remind them. And so what Knudge does is then, as it allows the client to set some parameters around if they want these reminders to come via email or text notification or push notification. It allows them to snooze the reminders or set a time in the future when they want to be reminded about it. It gives some control to the end client as to how they're receiving this information.
So, on a surface level, it's a reminder notification application that you've incorporated into your practice and now offer to other advisors. So it's a technical way of bugging people to get stuff done. But I'm curious, Dr. Somers, your impression of it, because what it seems like, I have to assume that when people are reminded, and Shaun's helping them with that third issue of just forgetting, right? When they are reminded of the important things that they need to do and they accomplish that, there has to be almost like a closed loop where they're starting to feel better, right? And better able to handle the overwhelm and the emotion. So do you have any thoughts? Can you maybe talk about that a little bit, where if somebody's better able to build a system to get things done, that it helps them free up some of that emotional capacity and just feel better overall?
Sure. Nothing feels as good as progress. I can tell you that, right? At whatever it is you've set as a goal, nothing feels as good as making progress on it. And when you fail to make progress on it, you'll often jettison it. Or, returning to the theme, you'll forget that it was even a goal. Witness flossing, witness. I hear Shaun, and I think about my own practice as a healthcare practitioner. How often do I send people out with 5 to 7 things to do? And I know that as soon as they leave my office, unless I've got something else in place for them, I have just pretty much lost control, right? Lost a significant amount of influence. From a research perspective, we know that advice that includes elements that the client has to do without monitoring or supervision, that advice, the success rate tends to plummet just because of that. And you add some of the other things, if it's a behavior change that you're being asked to do for the long term, like rein in your spending, or if there's some unpleasantness to it, if the person has never done it before, these are other contributors to why follow through doesn't happen. As soon as you add some monitoring, some supervision, and if you can combine that with a close relationship, right? Like a sense that this practitioner cares deeply for the outcome that you are trying to achieve with him or her. When you combine that, that is a dramatic 1-2 punch to procrastination. It can completely turn things around. A little bit of support while you take those first steps means a huge amount of difference.
And I feel
like I've heard you say more. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel like I've heard you say before there was I'm going to butcher this more, but something along the lines of the top indicators that someone will take action or change are believing that they can and then having support to do that. And in the financial world, the personal finance world, I think that is just the key to this shift that is happening in our profession, Jim, where years ago, personal finance was about someone selling you an insurance product or, picking stocks. And now it is about, just being a partner and helping you in your life and being there to provide that support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I find why I've been so interested in Knudge and your work, Shaun, and obviously Dr. Somers in your work is that, like we described before, I too have never been thanked for the asset allocation that I've put together. Certainly never been thanked for making somebody talk about what their estate plan looks like. But admittedly, I was somewhat reluctant to introduce Knudge because I didn't want to bug them. We've talked about nagging and bugging, but it really, what I've learned from the two of you is that it's an important part of the process in helping people deal with just being a human being. And as we've started to introduce that, people have started to thank us as well for helping them get things done and organizing their day-to-day in such a way where they can get things done and open up space to just deal with everything else because they know they're moving the needle forward. And I do think that's where our industry will continue to move, especially with new technologies. There's a new AI personal finance app that I'm being marketed on what feels like a regular basis. So the technical things I think are going to continue to be more and more commoditized. But I think what our clients and most people need more help with is some of this human stuff, right? Understanding their emotional side, understanding where some of the overwhelm comes from, where they're in or out of balance, where they're spending a lot of their resources, so to speak. And just, again, I think it's a great point to highlight, just forgetting, right? I feel really self-important sometimes when I spend a good hour with a client, but then I realize that they close the computer and close the Zoom link and they just move on immediately to the rest of their lives, which they should, right? In a lot of cases. So it's cool that you've, taken the next step to actually provide a service to advisors that helps so many people just continually get things done. It's really impressive.
The point you made about, your own, belief or feeling that was restricting you from helping your clients, that you didn't want to bother them. I felt the same oftentimes. And I think I was always very good at, I would always send that first reminder email of everything. And then I would send almost every single time the second one. And what we're finding very interesting in the early data across the aggregate of 800 or so firms who have started using Knudge, it seems like the magic is in the third reminder. That's where we're so far seeing an uptick in completion rates, is not the first, not the second, but the third reminder that goes out. And I know as a human, myself as an advisor, when I was in control manually of reminding, I had that same barrier that you just mentioned, your own feeling, Jim, about it. And oftentimes I would skip the third reminder because of my own, self-consciousness about it. And, having a tool like this that doesn't feel that, it knows like, no, we need to continue to provide this information to them so that they, we are solving for that forgetting part.
Right. And, in between the second and third, I think for me, that's where I definitely felt like I was moving from being supportive and trying to help to bugging, right? And that third one feels excessive, third strike you're out, whatever analogy you want to use. And it's interesting. And I'm sure that's probably some science backed as well, that people need reminding. And the other thing that's interesting too is the idea of trying to meet people where they are and giving them the ability to kind of take care of things at their own time, at their own pace, right? And being realistic with folks. When can we accomplish these things? I think, if you leave somebody, and I'm curious your thoughts, Moira, on this as well. If you leave somebody with a list of 5 things to do with no definitive time frame for when they're supposed to get done, and then you send them back out to the world, that just doesn't seem like a recipe for success. And I think one of the things that Knudge does, and maybe you could expand upon this, is just kind of small behaviors changes, small tasks, breaking it down into very short term. I can accomplish this one particular thing. You kind of describe it in the book as advice that will work and advice that doesn't. And some of the things that I thought were interesting and apply to what Shaun's up to at Knudge is kind of breaking things down. And this is a specific to do with a specific time frame that I can accomplish and kind of move things forward.
Mm-hmm. No matter how daunting a task, there's a first step, right? And if that first step seems daunting, it's probably because you haven't broken it down sufficiently, or because there is a lot of emotion getting in the way. And sometimes what you need to ask for is support to take the first step. And I always ask people to just look at their own track record. When have they done hard things? People do hard things all the time. And when have they successfully done hard things that especially the ones that were under their control and not being imposed on them from outside, but hard things that got them closer to where they wanted to be in life? And what led to that? What led to that success? And it does absolutely start with some degree of self-efficacy or belief that you can do at least this. And then it's, like some psychological version of Newtonian physics that once you get going, it's easier to keep going. And once you know that there's somebody who's got your back and who can pick you up if you stumble or quickly answer a question when you have it, it's just so much easier to do it. And I'm all for automation, but boy, when you really earn your salt in whatever profession you're in, is in the relationship that undergirds it. Right now my clients are having trouble getting on Zoom calls with me ever since I upgraded the security. And oh my goodness, getting through the Zoom, you guys, is, they keep directing me to their FAQs and, I get that a lot of people can get their answer. I don't seem to be able to. Could you help me? And that, when you get really stuck like that, there's this sense of powerlessness and despair. And that may seem overly dramatic, but it's really frustrating when you can't get past something and you need a human to take you there. And so this automation that's combined with a real human being who might notice that, this has taken 5 nudges and it hasn't been going, maybe should we talk? What's going on? Or the next meeting to say, boy, this is one can that gets kicked down the road repeatedly, huh? What should we do a reset on this and figure out what's getting in the way so that you can keep bringing in relationship and expertise along with the scaffolding that says, yeah, this is a human brain we're working with here. This is a human heart, and let's make sure we've got it all covered.
Right.
That's such a good point. Knudge is not designed to replace the relationship of an advisor. It's meant to arm that planner with the information they need to be better at their job. And, what Moira just said, we're seeing that firsthand. I mean, the things that are getting, first of all, being able to start a meeting with celebrating things that did get done is such a better way to start off a conversation than, can you tell me all the stuff you didn't do since the last time we talked? Like, who wants to go to that hour with you, Jim, when it starts like that, right?
A lot of those hours get postponed, right? Those meetings don't even happen because it's, and it's usually, I get the excuse, but I know deep down some of those reschedules are just, I didn't have time. I didn't get it done.
Oh, let's asterisk this. Procrastination does not feel good to the client. It can be mortifying to know that you've once again not done this thing, and it absolutely is associated with canceled appointments. So go for it, Shaun. What were you going to say?
Yeah. No, I think in the conversations, when we're able to celebrate those wins, I think we can focus on the things better in the meetings with clients that didn't get done. And oftentimes what I've found is it's us as their planner that didn't do a good enough job explaining to them why this task was important and why it was important to what they care about, not what we care about, but why it was important to the things that they've already described in our relationship as being very priorities to them, or things that are very important, valuable to them. And so when you can come back and say, this one didn't get done, maybe, what we need to do is to revisit explaining and having the conversation with them.
I think you bring up a really great point, and one that I wanted to touch on here today. I talked to a lot of interesting people from a lot of different types of disciplines, and oftentimes when we're talking about dealing with human beings, it all comes back to why, what their purpose, what their meaning is, what they're trying to get accomplished, if they have some deeper personal attachment to it. So I'm just curious, Moira, your thoughts on purpose, meaning, why, however you want to maybe chime in there. But it seems to me that at the beginning of a lot of this and trying to get things done, there should be some conversation about what's important to you as an individual, as a couple, as a family.
If planners can't do that, then they're sunk, right? But it feels weird to be saying this as a psychologist, but I sometimes think that insight is the booby prize. The real prize is changed lives, however it is you get there. And I don't mean to turn this into a police state where, we like force people to do the things that are good for them, eat those Brussels sprouts. But motivation flags. That your why changes. For heaven's sake, your identity changes. I'm on faculty with the Financial Transitionist Institute, where, they train people to work with folks as they undergo major life transitions. And one of the things that differentiates just a sort of a change in your life from a transition event is that part of your identity has shifted. You are a different person when that baby gets placed in your arms. You are a different person when you sign the divorce papers. And so the why can really fluctuate from day to day, and it is going to profoundly change in response to some of these major events. But the how and the that, right? The fact that stuff is getting done, that is what undergirds you, even during periods where you don't even know where your up is anymore, right? Like you're in this profound grief reaction. To just know that the stuff you put in place 5 years ago in terms of, the life insurance policy that got paid for monthly because your advisor put that in place for you, that is what is now coming into play to support your life
Mm,
at a point when you, as I said, you don't even know which way is up anymore.
right.
It's, I don't care if people forgot why they were paying that bill. I just care that it got paid.
Right.
And so I toggle between those two things. Absolutely, the why is critical. And you better make sure as a professional that you do have this thing called informed consent, and that it's rooted in a profound appreciation of what the client wants and why. But that's the easy stuff, right? Then the rubber hits the road, and you've got to help support implementation.
Right. That's great.
The why definitely changes. I agree with that. And I don't know if this is right or wrong, or maybe the wordings aren't, but I've always talked about it more as priorities, because that's a now thing. And what we try to start each conversation with clients with is, what's most important to you today? What are your priorities today, so that we can then draw like the current why to these tasks, and also help them understand, okay, maybe we can push that other one off to later, because it doesn't, if it isn't something that, is going to negatively impact their life in a way, like, you can't push paying your taxes off till 4 years without there being consequences to it. But there are certain things that, could wait a little bit and not have it derail your financial future. And those are ones that we can revisit that time frame we're setting as reasonable to get things
So
done.
I'm really interested in hearing your take on this as financial advisors, because you can have this intellectual awareness that something ought to be, right? Ought to be a priority, but it doesn't feel like it now, right? There's back to all the competing demands on your money. So what? Yeah, I'd really like to hear your take on the tension between what feels really important today versus all the stuff that has to happen for the future, because that's another one of those things that reduces the likelihood of follow through if it's future oriented as opposed to today.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but we want to know what's most important to them today, so that we can address that, because I do find oftentimes that people can't focus on or move on to those other things until we sweep, even if the thing that's most important to them today, and I find this more often than not, the thing they come in that's bothering them from a financial planner's lens is often what would be more the pebbles versus the boulders, right? And we need to sweep those pebbles out of the way for them, so that they can, have, okay, now I know that, now that's taken care of. That thing that was bothering me is done. Now, what do you think we should focus on, right? And that's where we can come in and say, our job, yes, we want to take care of what is really bugging you here, or at least hear you on it, and maybe explain why we shouldn't prioritize it, and when we're going to get to that. But we're going to go through that process with you of having that conversation. And now our role as advisors is to help analyze your situation, so that we can bring up risks and opportunities that you should be thinking about bubbling to the top. And here's why we think that, and playing that role with them. That's at least, the approach that we tend to take with it. And then as far as some of the moving forward with decisions or the ought to stuff, I'll try to bucket those in a couple of different ways. There's the ought to, and if you don't, it will have a meaningful impact on your future. And then there's the ought to, and if you don't, it probably won't have a meaningful impact on your future. It'll just like move the dial from, great to really, really great, or from, and those are the ones where how hard do you really push on versus you gotta focus on the ones where, listen, I know you don't want to do this one, but this one could have a real negative impact on you.
I agree. And it's something that we've had to learn over the last few years. If we we've moved into a similar model to yours, more of kind of a personal CFO with an ongoing relationship with our clients. And I think when we started that, we introduced a very, what we thought, logical process to the client, that we do these things in this order because this is financial planning. And what I think we've tried very hard recently to get better at is having a collaborative discussion, like you described, about what their priorities are, and not necessarily challenging them too much if we disagreed. Because what we found similarly is that even though we think there are big things that the client needs to accomplish, sometimes just getting the Roth conversion strategy or the backdoor Roth, because they have that in their mind that they need to get that done, even though they have another 6 months in the year and there's all these other things that we want to get to. If that's pressing and just scratching at their brain, if it's really important to them and it's a priority and we can help them get it accomplished, it gets it out of the way and frees up the space, just like we talked about, so that they're open to and they have the mental capacity and the space to tackle some of the other things that we think are also important. So I guess just thinking aloud about it with the two of you now, I think what we try to do is just make sure we're collaborating with them on the things that they tell us are their priorities. Of course, if there's any red flags or things that are definitively black and white that they need to take care of, it's our responsibility to get that in front of them and help them understand, to use an easy example, you have to file your taxes by a certain deadline, right? That is something you have to do. Or if they're wildly underinsured and there's a big risk, we have to put that in front of them and help them understand why they might need to take action. But I think if we can help people cross some things off that have been bugging them, that are priorities to them, moving those pebbles out of the way, to use your analogy, Shaun, it does help to kind of move the heavier stuff down the road. But it's a work in progress, and we're not always good at it. And it's something that each time we take a client through our process, we're learning and trying to get better as we go.
Spot on. There are things that are black and white, and you've got to do them. And then there are a whole lot of things in personal finance that there are multiple paths to get to an end destination. And, we have opinions on which paths are optimal, and we can educate on that and make sure they're making an informed decision on the path that they're choosing if it differs from what we feel is right. And then there are other things where it's like, yeah, but if you take that path, you're going to fall off the cliff. And so we need to pause here and really, those are the areas we really need to do more than just educate and try to work with them to sort of change the mindset on, if they're going to fall off the cliff. Whereas if it's just going to be a longer journey or something along there and they're comfortable with that, okay, let's just educate them that's where it's going to be and be there to be a guide along the
way. I think about the people on the call who may be, I don't know, parenting teenagers, and in this place of, you can see that this might be a really bad decision that is underway. And sometimes people just need, depending what kind of learner they are, right? They may just need to learn things in their own way at their own pace. Even if it's painful to watch over. The fact is, you don't have to pay your taxes on time. Did you know that?
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yeah,
good point.
It's just consequences to that. And I'm reminded of that because, I've had a couple reach out to me recently, and, they reached out because they hadn't paid their taxes. They hadn't filed their taxes in 3 or 4 years because there was a whole lot of emotion stemming from a whole lot of difficulty in life. And so, just finding out again, what is the smallest possible step and what can I do as a practitioner? Well, okay, I can put their hand in the hand of an accountant who I know is not a judgmental jerk. And I can help them, we can all work together on just getting this stuff cleared up without any shame or blame or judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And because, again, think about it for the callers, right? Whatever the domain is in your life, whether it's dieting or exercise or something in your family life that needs attending to, or updating your cybersecurity, or attending to that little maintenance required light on your car, whatever the thing that you are most motivated to get started on, even if it's plan B in the eyes of the world, is better than the plan A that's going to stay in the drawer and never get acted on.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing feels better than progress. So if you can start taking action, as long as it's not wrong action, and keep on, you will find that the procrastination cycle gets broken.
That's a great, I think, place to start wrapping up our conversation, is just taking that first next small step. I like to call it picking up a quick win, right? Crossing something off the list so you could feel good about yourself and kind of getting people going. Is there anything else, any quick recommendations or advice that you'd have for people who are trying to get things moved forward besides that next first broken down small step that you can feel good about? Is there anything else that you'd like to leave people thinking about?
Identify the next step and get it into the calendar. Schedule it. It's not real until it's scheduled. Beyond that, seeing whether you can experiment with changing the emotion of it. You know, even sometimes the language from I have to do this to I get to do this. Sometimes that's a little Susie Sunshine, but sometimes it's not. It's like, I get to go to the gym. This body is an absolute marvel. And the fact that I can get myself there, I'm already blessed, right? And so there's this way in which sometimes we can start changing the emotional context by taking us out of sort of a victim of this into an active agent. So identify the next smallest step, get it into your schedule, take it, and if necessary, take it with support, and then start to see what you might do to change the emotional context. Sometimes the previous 4 are already changing the emotional context.
Right.
Be playful with it.
That's great. We appreciate it. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, in the back of your book, there's a number of suggested books to check out and read. Are there any one or two that would come to mind for either one of you, Shaun, not specifically to Moira's list and advice that sticks, but is there anything that people should check out if they relate to this conversation and they feel like they need some help changing behavior, getting going? Is there anything that we'd want to spotlight for folks in particular?
Go ahead, Shaun.
I would always spotlight advice that sticks. That's the one we give to all of our advisors here. That's where we start. Anything that Moira is doing would be where I would start for sure. I could listen to her talk about this all day. Other things that we've done, we've had some of our advisors working with a group called Shaping Wealth. And, it isn't as much specifically about getting stuff done, but it's more about that beginning the process of having different conversations with clients. And really, I think, Jim, ending on what you were talking about, helping advisors feel more comfortable with the uncomfortable. People who are trained more on a whole lot of technical aspects of things, getting them more comfortable engaging in these uncomfortable conversations sometimes. That is a core element of becoming a great planner.
And what about for individuals who are listening that are not advisors? Is there any reading, podcasts? Where do you go to kind of get yourself going on this topic that you'd like to point out to folks?
Anything that Daniel Pink produces is always just a joy. He always just leaves you with sort of a lifted heart and some really pragmatic strategies. So that's really fun. Chip and Dan Heath, a brother pair, Chip Heath and Dan Heath, have written some really great things like Switch is one of my favorites. It's probably 10 years old now, but it's fun. Podcast by Katie Milkman is, again, just a really fun way to start thinking about things. And then there's, depending where the stuck points are. So there's, if you're trying to develop a writing habit, a woman named Beck Evans has put out a beautiful book called Written, and it incorporates wonderful behavioral science principles and applying to something that you're trying to turn into a daily discipline. So those would be some of my.
Great.
There's another podcast called The Slight Change of Plans by Maya Shankar, which has really been interesting to listen to. It's individual stories of folks who have gone through change and how it's affecting their lives.
Yes, I'm just remembering Katie Milkman's podcast is called Choiceology.
Okay, cool. So we'll link out to that stuff. And the last question I like to ask everyone, obviously we're involved in financial services somehow, but the show is about well-being in general and feeling better outside of building good financial behaviors and having accountability partners and feeling supported and all the things that we've talked about today. Is there anything outside of finance that you go back to, think about a habit, a behavior, a routine that you think helps you feel better overall?
I'm going to let Moira answer, because now you're hitting on all the things I procrastinate.
Well, there's a big assumption embedded in that I don't know. Everybody's got something, right? I'm gonna speak now from wearing my neuropsychologist hat, that we have to take care of our bodies and our minds, and the best way to do that is to challenge ourselves regularly, and to put ourselves in positions of being challenged. So to have a workout buddy, for example, so that you actually do show up for that walk that you said you were going to take, and then to consider adding maybe a wearable device that will beep at you if you're slowing down and smelling the roses. It's not that kind of walk. To intervene early with sensory loss. If you notice that you need glasses to get them, and the thing that most people in life procrastinate on is getting hearing aids. And when you procrastinate on getting hearing aids, it turns out that you start losing cognitive capacity. Whatever it is, if you can preserve body and mind by challenging yourself in ways that also keep you happy and connected socially, take those psychosocial vitamins. Those are the tricks to
That's great.
Having a life worth living.
And that's a great wrinkle on it when you started to describe taking care of your body and mind. I think we all just think of exercise, but it's the challenge. It's the doing difficult things and accomplishing those things that is a good part of that, correct?
But being happy while you're doing it.
Not miserable. Yeah. Great.
Finding the things that challenge you but keep you joyful.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And I think, understanding a little bit more about ourselves as human beings goes a long way in just taking the first steps into improving our well-being. And I think people will get a lot out of our conversation. So thank you very much. Real quick, last question. Any social media accounts, websites, where would people go? Shaun, first to you, to check out Single Point or Knudge or anything else that you want to spotlight?
Yeah, Knudge is spelled with a K, so we like our silent K's, just like our ale, our kale. knudge.com, and my financial planning firm is Single Point Partners.
Great.
Yes. As well.
Appreciate it. And how about you, Dr. Somers? Anything specific you want people to check out?
Just those wonderful podcasts that we mentioned, other people's resources. My website is moneymindandmeaning.com. That's the website that highlights my work as a family wealth consultant and as a behavioral strategist. So you're welcome to check me out there if you'd like.
Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Take care.